So anyway, then in '92, my wife and I, we had a big place out west of near Clearwater out there west of Monticello. And so we had a cabin there, and she said, I'd like to build a house on that. And so we ended up building a house out there, and we moved there for about 5 years and rented this house out, because remember, I told you, she said, we're never going to sell this house. And so we rented it out, and of course, renters, we had pretty good renters, but you know, they live in it, but they don't really take care of much things. So when we got back then in '97, we came back, I had a lot of fixing to do and a lot of things that never did get fixed even, but that's when we came back in '97 then, because I had resigned from this Osseo City engineering thing in '92. So, because I couldn't handle that from where I was. So anyway, that's my story. I'll be glad to try and answer any questions you may have about some other things there.
I'm curious, all the infrastructure things you talked about in Osseo,
Yeah.
is any of that related to why a lot of streets don't have sidewalks, or have sidewalk and maybe front of one house but not the rest?
Good question.
We had some conversations at meetings about that. In fact, my suggestion to the council was, when they built those 2 nursing homes down there in southeast, is that a lot of the people were like to walk, you know, and that was quite a walk uptown, but so some of the people, there were no sidewalks in some parts of it. So we had a hearing on that, and there was one individual down on Broadway Street there between 4th and 5th Avenue that really was strongly opposed, because it was going to be assessed, you know. So anyway, it kind of stymied it. And so I asked finally at the end, after he chewed me out, I asked him, I said, well, if for some reason I could get the money some other place that would pay for it, that you wouldn't be assessed, would you be in favor?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Was this in the 70s?
Yeah, I think it was probably in the '70s. And so, anyway, you see, money is the main issue with everything. And you know, hey, the city was putting in things that were needed for the city, you know, and so somebody has to pay for it. And so the benefited parties were usually assessed for that sort of thing. And so that, but we did have a program, Ken, where we got a limited amount of money each year from Hennepin County through some state aid monies, that because we weren't a population of 5,000 or more, we couldn't get it from the state directly. The county would give us a little bit.
Like a grant?
Yeah, anyway, we did have some sidewalks that the trees had pushed them up and broken and this and that. And I went around town and I marked every one of them. And with that money, we had them all fixed one year. See? Now, with the project, though, like in '91 or so, the purpose of dividing the town into 2 years was that we didn't want to tear up the whole town all at once. And so we had the northwest area and part of the northeast area in the '91 program, and then the rest of it in '92. Now in '91, I think this street was in it, and so it got instead of, we weren't putting in 4 foot wide sidewalks anymore. When we put in new sidewalks, Ken, we made them 5 feet wide because, hey, the two of you walking side by side down the street, try to do it on a 4 foot sidewalk. So we made them 5. And then, and this happened to be this business district here. We didn't have the ability to, our houses are so close to the right of way that if I pull the sidewalks back to leave a boulevard, the sidewalk's right in front of my porch here almost, you know.
Right. Especially on the northeast side of town.
Yeah, this is the northeast here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so there were a lot of different things that happened that we could do only so much because we were limited in how we could handle that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I think the town turned out pretty good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You had a lot to do with it.
Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking about this is that it was I don't know if you want to call it the custom or the way of the environment we had to do it, is that the blacktop streets would need to be seal coated. I'm going to say every 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you seal coat these streets, and then you got to leave it. First they put down the asphalt, and then you come with the thing, and there were 2 kinds of seal coat. One was sand, and one was this small rock, BB-like style. I can't remember what to call them anymore, but they were more expensive, which I chose to want to go with because the sand was really not the way to do it. So about every 4 years we'd have a seal coating project, but it wasn't assessed. It was out of the city's general fund, you know, so they could do that. But now I notice that the pattern now is they don't do that anymore. Since they've invented this machine that can machine the top of the blacktop off, just like this street in front of me here, 5, 6, 7 years ago, whatever it was, they mill down about an inch of the top surface. And then they lay another.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to have it seal coated then, see? Mm-hmm. And it kept messes from, you can imagine where that rock was all going over people's yards and everything else, you know, because it had to be down for so many days in order to cure properly.
Mm-hmm.
And it needed to be done, Paul, early in the season, like at least by July 4th, because it needed time to cure, otherwise it would peel off. So anyway, we had issues like that we had to deal with as well, and so that was not a fun thing.
What was the population back when you started of Osseo?
You know, I think it was about 2,800, and amazing you asked that because I searched it out the other day. In the 2021 population that was given to me was 2,606. That's where we're at right now. Yeah, so it.
Well, we have to build up to expand.
Yeah.
There's no room.
Well, there's no land, but the apartment buildings, there's some problems with all those apartments, but for the most part, I always thought that this town was a good place for senior citizen apartments.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though it's up on the north end there by the city hall, for instance, Real Life and so forth, is that the people there have the ability to go to Dean's store, the bank across the street. You know, the doctor, yeah,
Right here, yeah.
Doctors and dentists, and if there ever was an ideal place to have senior housing, it's the city of Osseo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so that
Agreed.
that was interesting.
Wasn't there a time where it was floated, the idea of expanding Osseo north up into, you know, what?
Champlin or Brooklyn Park?
Never north, Paul,
Oh, okay.
but there was talk of going through Brooklyn Park before it was incorporated,
Yeah.
as far over as Broadway Street. Yeah,
By Calvin Gray's farm.
where all those factories and stuff are over and through there. It could have gone there, or it could have taken anything out of Maple Grove, because Maple Grove wasn't incorporated
There was
either
nothing.
then
Yeah,
till
that
then.
was all gravel pits.
Yeah.
You know.
And so, but the city fathers at that time, and I'll say the business organizations, were not interested in accomplishing and taking on more undeveloped land. They said, we got it right here.
Okay.
Just keep it the same. And so they didn't make a move to do it. Well, then, as soon as they were incorporated, then they don't have any jurisdiction anymore to have that done.
Right.
And in fact, for many years, I also was the engineer for Champlin Township. And then the city of Champlin, out there right on the river, was very small at that time. But they were an incorporated city, but the township was not. So I've had the blessings of going to an annual township board meeting, and it was in a little old church building, a white church building over on 109th and East River Road. That's where they held their board meetings. And so I got to participate in that, even with the merger then, when the state municipalities demanded that, hey, you do something here. So they did merge with the city, and then I became the engineer then for Champlin as well.
Yeah.
So, which was kind of interesting. So, yeah.
So, of all the businesses that used to be in Osseo, were there any that brought people from outside of Osseo more than others? Like, I know there used to be a big hardware store downtown. Did they attract people? Was it the ice cream shop? What made Osseo a destination back then?
It was, well, Osseo for years was the hub of the whole north community here, because Maple Grove was farmland, Brooklyn Park was farmland, Champlin was farmland, and so this became the center of commercial activities where everybody came to the store and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So back, I'm going to just say, in the late 50s and early 60s, the city of Osseo had two car companies, Iton Chevrolet,
Mm-hmm.
and across the street here was the Ford company, who later moved down to Brookdale, and it's Brookdale Ford.
Mm-hmm.
And Itons were forced to move down
Right.
to the freeway there, because the company said, hey, all the development is down here. You're done up here in Osseo anymore, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then there were two hardware stores. On Central Avenue there, across from Iton Chevrolet, just south of the.
There's one where the carpet shop is.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
one I remember.
It was Stan and Louise Larson. It was named a couple of different things, Coast to Coast one time, and then they went with somebody else, and then across next to Dean's Supermarket on the corner was Biederman's hardware store. So they had two hardware stores too.
And that's the train shop? The old train shop?
No, the other way, right?
The luggage shop?
The luggage shop?
Where the luggage shop is.
Yeah,
Okay.
right in
And
the
in the
front there
house.
where all the parking is, right on that corner.
Okay, yeah.
That's where the old wooden building was Biederman's Hardware. Harry Biederman had lived next door then.
Yeah.
And then when Dean Selvig, he and his wife Heidi bought a little store right next to the bank. And so when he grew enough so that he ended up buying that land there where Biederman's house was, and next door was the house of Ed Kilmer. Now Ed Kilmer was an old guy who actually was the city treasurer back in the 50s, and he was supposed to be in charge of the sewer and water. So when I got named that, then he was retired then.
Mm-hmm.
But talk about a job, is that this comes to mind too, is that we didn't have automatic water reading systems like we do now. Every 3 months, I had to go to every house in town and read the water meter. Every 3 months. Took me about 3 days. And then I turn over the information to, her name was Connie Buechler. Her husband was a barber uptown here, George Buechler. They lived over northeast there. I'd bring that over there and she did the billing. See? And so they didn't really have anybody working up at City Hall. The only ones up there was myself and Jim Seibert once in a while, you know. And so that's how it was back then. So, okay. Then of course now, a couple months ago, even the electric company put in a new meter so that they can come by and
Just electronically read it.
electronically do it.
Meter, electric meter.
A couple of years ago, they replaced the water meters down there, and they got a box out in the front. They come by and and the same way with the gas company. So none of these people have to go house to house anymore to do that. That's what's changed in the last 60 years.